Welcome to part 1 of using the sequencer in Reason 8.3. This is going to be a 2 or 3 part series. So let's just go ahead and get started with this. We're going to start from the top left hand corner. You've got your toolbar here. These can all be accessed just by clicking on them. There are also hotkeys to access these as well. So for the selection tool, you press Q, and you can use this, as the name suggests, to select things. You can just click and hold and select a group of items, of clips. If you double click on a clip, you can select MIDI notes as well. You can grab and hold notes, Control Z and put that back where it was. If you've got a note selected, you can arrow up and down in various areas of the sequencer, like the inspector here. The pencil tool here, and all of these match with the QWERTY keyboard. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, so that's one easy way to remember what the hotkeys are for this. So we've got W next, and that's the pencil tool, which you can use to draw in notes. You also use the pencil tool to adjust velocity information. And I'll hit Q, get the selection tool, delete that out. Escape, W for the pencil tool. You can also draw clips in. And when you do a lot of these actions, you have to take note here. I'll expand out with H. These tools, a lot of them work in line with whatever your snap value is. So you can see that's jumping by bar because I have my snap value set to bar. So if I were to change this to eighth notes, then you'll see it's a quicker snap to the eighth notes in the grid here. Okay, next we have the eraser tool, which is pretty obvious what it will do. You can erase clips. I'll Control Z, and you can erase MIDI notes. You can also click and hold and erase a selection of notes. I'll escape out of there. The razor tool here, this, like the other tools, this is going to work along with whatever your snap value is. So if I go to bar, you can only cut bars. So even if I'm clicking in the center of the bar here, it cuts the next one. If I go to eighth notes, then I can make more precise cuts. If I turn snap off by pressing S, then I can click wherever I want. And I'm just going to Control Z to get rid of all of those. Next we have the mute tool, and we access that by hitting T. This will mute clips, and you get a readout of these gray bars indicator to let you know that they're muted. Just click again to unmute. If we go into a MIDI clip here, one thing to note is that you cannot mute individual notes. It's just, if you look in the clip overview area, we've got those same bars. You can't mute individual notes, MIDI notes, just it will mute the whole clip. I'll escape, unmute that, and we've got the magnifying tool, which you access by hitting Y. With this, if you just click in the blank area of the range pane, you zoom in. You can also click and hold and select an area, and it will zoom that area. Now if you hit Control, it will change that to a minus, and you zoom out. And I'm going to hit G to zoom out a bit there. Lastly, we have the hand tool, which you access by hitting U. And you can just use this to grab in the Arrange pane and drag left or right or up and down if you had additional tracks here. So moving on, and I'm just going to hit Q to bring the selection tool back up. So moving on, we've got the snap function, which we've briefly mentioned. You can turn that snap on by hitting S. And this is just going to, as we've already saw, it will affect some of the tools that you're using. When you're moving clips, you see how this snaps to the bar because that's what we have set. If you turn snap off, you get a more fine movement. I'll put it back on. And next we have and of course this is just where you adjust the grid settings. So you can kind of note here, I hope the video resolution is good enough that you can see the lines that come up here when you change the snap value. So you see you have these finer lines. If I go back to bar, those are gone now. So that's a visual indicator when you're working in the Arrange pane of what to give you an idea of what your snap value is set to. Now moving on, we have the inspector, and I'm just going to briefly go over this because I do have a whole video that I did on using the inspector. But this just helps give you readout of information of various clips and MIDI data, parameter automation data within the Arrange pane. So as you can see, I have the MIDI clip here selected, and you have the position at bar 24. This goes by bars, beats, 16th notes, and ticks. And then you have the length. It's 9 bars long. This can be adjusted by double-clicking and manually entering. You can also use the up and down arrows. Depending on what you have selected, it will change. So if I double-click and select a MIDI note, you now have different information here. You can see the note position, where as far as the pitch is concerned, and the velocity. And as we did in the Arrange pane, here in the editor you can double click and put in your own values, and you can see the velocity dropped here. So I'll Control Z, put that back as it was, and escape out. I'm going to hit F3 to bring up the browser. I just want to bring an audio clip in here to show you. That there will be more information, different information, even if you're using audio, if you have an audio clip selected. You can see we have the position and length, which is the same. You also have the fade. So if you have this marker here in the front, you can drag that back to create a fade. And that's going to adjust based on your snap settings. So you see it's jumping by bar because I have bar set. You can adjust that fade by using this here as well. And that's not going to pay attention to your snap values. It's just, it goes in increments. So if you took your snap off, you can freely adjust this then. And then there's a fade out. And you also have level control. And you can see that that's there. And it also you can transpose your audio here. If you'd like to know more information about the inspector, just check out the video that I did on that. I'll F3 and get rid of that browser. And so where are we here? Let's move on to manual record. So take note here in the track list area, whenever you select a track, by default, it will be armed for recording. If it's a MIDI track, it's armed for recording MIDI information. as well as parameter automation whenever you select. If you don't want that to happen, just select manual record. Then you'll have to go in and arm it yourself for recording. Okay, and I'll turn that off. Then here are global mute and solo buttons. So if you have several tracks muted, instead of having to go in and individually uncheck each one, you can just hit that mute button and that will take care of that. The same with solo. That will unsolo any ones that you have soloed in the track list. Next we have a new note lane here. So I've got this NNXT grand piano. I've got some MIDI information recorded. If I wanted to create a new note lane for this instrument and track, then I would just hit this here. And as you can see, we have a new note lane. So with note lanes, you can mute the lane. So if I put these new ones in and I want to mute the first one that I recorded, you just hit that there. To close out of the lane, just hit the X. And I'll add some back in just to show you can grab this lane handle and rearrange these also. You get a red line showing you where it's going. And I'll close these out. Here you can add track parameter automation. So again, we have our grand piano. This allows you to access any of the parameters for the NNXT and add those for parameter automation. So I'll add the mod wheel, and as you can see, and you can't change that name. I'm double clicking. That's just going to remain the same because it matches with a parameter on the NNXT. And I also have a video on recording and editing automation, 2 separate videos for those each. So if you'd like to know more about automation, just look out for those on my channel. Now this next one here, also just note that whatever instrument you have, you're going to have different parameters available to automate. So you have a bit more here for the Kong Drum Designer. And here you can create pattern lanes for the Matrix step sequencer or the redrum if you're using those. Below this area we have the block view button. So if you want to arrange your song in blocks, you just select that. And I'll do a video on working with blocks in the future. This is switching back to song view. And if you have created some blocks and done some arranging there, and you decide you want to work in song mode, you can mute the block automation with that button. Here we have the ruler just below the inspector area. And this is essentially the song's timeline measured in bars. And if I zoom out a bit, you can see you got bar 5, 6, 7, then you've got beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, and then you've got the 16th notes. Now moving on to the track list area. To delete a track, you just simply select it. You can right click and delete track and device. That's as simple as that. I'll Control Z to bring it back. You can also change the color of a track, say red, and that will also change the clip. that's on the track. Control Z. Now you can also change the color of the clip, and that will be separate from the track color. So that can be done with MIDI clips as well. You can rename the tracks. Whether it's MIDI or audio. We already touched on record enable. This is for record enabling audio. If you're on an audio track, if you're on a MIDI track, then this will record enable the MIDI. And this is for parameter automation, arming for recording that. To add new audio tracks, you would simply hit Control T. I'll select this bottom one, Control T. It's going to add it below whatever track you had selected. And as you can see, well, you can reorder these tracks also by grabbing the track handle. And as with the lanes, you get that red line indicating where you are moving the track to. And we've already touched on the mute and solo. Whether it's a MIDI or audio track, you do have those available. Now for audio tracks, you choose your input for recording here. So once you click on that, you get a box here where you can choose mono input or stereo. And then depending on whatever audio interface you have connected, you should see options for choosing an input from your audio device. I currently don't have an audio interface connected, so that's why I don't have anything here. But that's where you would choose, which mic you want to record from. You can also record an instrument, a MIDI instrument, live as audio. So if I were to say select this piano, I'll hit F6 to bring up the rack, and I'll go to this is the mix device for the piano. You can see it there. You click on record source. This will then turn the piano into a record source that you can choose from in the sequencer. So not only with mics, if I click this now, you now have piano left or right. So if I change this to stereo, come back in, and then I choose piano. Now if I set that up there and bring up my on-screen keyboard by hitting F4, you can see now we've got audio coming into the track from the piano. Okay, so what else here? I'm going to add a couple more audio tracks just so I can show you. Get rid of the on-screen keys with F4. You can scroll up and down with your wheel on the mouse if you have one. You've also got the bar here for doing the same. And at the bottom of the track list, you have these magnifying tools, so you can zoom in on your tracks or out to increase the height vertically. Now if I scroll up to this audio clip, you can see the waveform there. This is the default is set to the center here, which is the normal waveform range. You can change that to smaller or zoomed out. You can also choose the zoom in. Now these will not adjust the audio level of the audio clip, just the view of the waveform. And if you're doing some editing and arranging in the Arrange pane here, a new feature in Reason 8.3 is if you have a clip selected, it can be MIDI or audio. I'll just choose this MIDI clip. If you click on the zoom here, it's going to zoom that clip to fit in the Arrange pane. So if I hit the H key and zoom way out here, and then I hit this again, you see it still does the same. It brings that whole clip into view. So I'll hit G and zoom out. The hotkey for this is Z. So with this clip selected, I'll hit Z, and you can see we now have this to view in the Arrange pane. Next we have the Song Navigator here, and you can use this to navigate horizontally in the Arrange pane. If you right click on this area here and hold, you can drag up and it will zoom in. If you drag down, it will zoom out, and you can also move to the left or right while doing so, while holding down. You can also grab either end, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. And if you notice here, behind that bar, you've got these gray lines. These essentially give you a quick reference for where your loop locators are. So if you want to get to them pretty quickly, you can just drag there, and there are your loop locators. Here you can see the song position pointer is at the very beginning. So if I drag there, now pay attention to this here. I'm going to drag the song position pointer out, and you can see it changes down here. And this here is the song end marker. So if we go there, this marks the end of your song, and that's important for taking note of when you're rendering down your song as an audio file. Okay, and as I've mentioned, this is the Arrange pane where you're going to do all of your arranging of audio and MIDI information. One other thing I'd like to mention about the Razor, if you would like to cut a space, if you'd like to cut clips throughout your whole song, you can come up to the ruler and just click, and it will create cuts along every track. And so I think we'll stop here with part 1. It's getting a bit long. Look out for part 2. I'll be getting that up soon. And I'll just end the video with this little dark track that I put together when I wanted to have some clips in here so that I can use for examples, and I just put this little short piece together. So thanks for watching. See you in the next video.